Hi everyone, welcome to our 10th climate clinic. This one is titled Lawns, Yawn, and it's kind of about land use and how lawns are a very good example of one kind of land use and kind of in the future where we want to go with how we use land in the context of kind of many environmental problems. So let's have a look. Lawns. A symbol of wider, outdated fashions in land use. So in the presentation, we're going to be looking at issues ranging from pesticides to biodiversity collapse to desertification and water misuse and chemicals and the effect on human health. So yeah, lots of jolly topics for your Sunday. So a brief history of lawns. In the 15th century, that's kind of when lawns first began, as my research suggests. And they were originally just kind of like large expanses of short grass, and they were kind of defensive measures for like aristocrats in their castles and their keeps in this northwest part of Europe. And by the 17th century, ideas about lawns had progressed not just from this kind of this piece of land which had some kind of sort of utility. It had food benefit or business or even defensive benefit. It was more of a leisure pursuit, and increasingly as Northwest European cultures kind of dominated other cultures around the world through colonialism and a variety of other practices, that this style of land management, which was lawns, became very, very fashionable, and it was all the rage to have a lawn, especially if you live in a climate where it's very difficult to grow a lawn, which is bizarre because they grow very easily in the climate where they originated, but in the 21st century, they're grown all over the world. This is a photo from Mexico, a housing development with some small little plots of dirt you can see. And that was put there. They were put there for lawns. But then you look to the background and you can see it's actually semi-arid, this part of Mexico where this housing development's going on. And so it's not really the ideal climate for grass to be growing year round. But anyway, what can I say? Northwest European fashions. They need to go. They need to go. So the modern situation, why should we even care? It's just a lawn. So here I've got 3 examples. So this is a golf course in South Africa, and South Africa is a biodiversity hotspot, and it has so many endemic plants and animals that you can't find anywhere else in the world. And when I look at this photo and you look at golf courses and coastal developments in these incredibly biodiverse areas with species found nowhere else on Earth, and then you see that we've plopped a golf course with kind of European species of grass that requires irrigation and chemical treatment to look the way that it does, you begin to realize that these very sensitive small locations that have the only of its kind plant or animal, that's how the biodiversity crisis in part is happening. It's through land use. And so that's one issue with lawns, is that they are contributing to the biodiversity collapse we're seeing. California and the water crisis. So you can see in this photo, there's kind of a lawn in the foreground and some very, very dry, I believe they're the Sierra Nevada, I'm not sure, mountains in the background. And they're really dry because this grass, again, it wouldn't grow there naturally. And so there it's causing a water crisis. I think the Central Valley in California is actually subsiding, which means it's sinking lower. The elevation compared to sea level is sinking because of the amount of water that's being extracted. And they will run out of water from their aquifers. And so should we really be using water for watering lawns in a time where we need to produce food for more people than ever, and we also have a biodiversity crisis? And the list goes on. In the United Kingdom and urban planning, lawns were a very important part and continue to be of lots of housing developments. But in my opinion, this is more of a style thing, but I think that they are very impersonal features, which in this case here, in this housing development, they don't provide the same enriching contact with nature that you would have if this space had been used for a park that looked slightly different. And on the whole, suburbia would be a very different place without grass. That's just one key idea to take away. So the modern situation. I've got a few statistics coming up just so we can better understand why it's actually quite relevant. So land use in the States, United States of America, 128,000 square kilometres of lawn, and the size of England, the entire country of England, is 132,000 kilometres. So basically they have enough lawn to cover the entire of England, and that's just for lawns. So they, in some states I was reading, places like Connecticut is up to 20% of the entire surface of the state is covered in lawns. It's a huge area we're talking about, and if all of that was converted to different types of land use, it could provide a really important reservoir for biodiversity and water use. In the United States, 50 to 70% of residential water is used for landscaping, mostly lawns. Again, we see that there's some climates where lawns don't grow without human input, additional input. And what we're doing is we're using far too much water. We're going to have a water crisis on the horizon. Should we really be using our water for lawns at a time like this? Do we have other priorities that we should be sorting first before we think about something like lawns? Chemical use. So we're currently looking ahead with a phosphate crisis. We're going to run out of phosphorus, which is a very important fertilizer, and some phosphorus is used for lawn maintenance. In addition, the ammonia-based fertilizers that are used commonly, especially again in the States, are really bad because they are net producers of CO2. You put this fertilizer on the grass, and of course it's going to absorb some carbon through its photosynthesis, but the application of fertilizer on the whole is releasing more carbon dioxide than it is helping the plants to absorb. So the use of fertilizer over an area that large, I mean, it's not going to be that entire area, granted, but it's quite a large amount of CO2. And if you want to go into the statistics, I've linked some things at the end which are really interesting. Biodiversity crisis. 1 million species currently are at risk of extinction in the next few decades, and we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction. It's widely acknowledged by the UN panel on blah, 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 blah. Link at the end. Anyway, genetic diversity is also plummeting globally, and this is slightly different to biodiversity. We're not just having species go extinct, but within species, the diversity is reduced. Imagine an oak tree. There's thousands and thousands of genetic variants within that population, but unfortunately, even if the oak tree doesn't go extinct, we are taking out huge amounts of that genetic diversity, which might be really important for future disease resistance or all kinds of things. We need diversity in genetics, and we need biodiversity across species, and without those two things, it threatens human survival on this planet. That's why lawns, which are often a monoculture of grass, or that's how they're envisioned ideally, they don't provide us with any of the biodiversity retention services that a natural landscape might be better able to provide for us. So lawns are also expensive. Americans, again, they're very America specific, but they spend roughly $60 billion a year on the turf grass industry, which is for things like stadiums and lawns. And it's a huge amount of money to spend when you consider what that money could do, or what that time that people are and effort people are putting into lawns, what that could achieve if it wasn't to be used on a land use which has so few positives. Also, time wasting. Americans spend more than 3 million hours a year collectively pushing or riding lawnmowers. And waste. The yard waste, which is like garden waste, is estimated to make up between 20 to 50% of stuff in US landfills. And this is crazy because not only are we taking any of the nutrients which are in that soil, taking them away, collecting them up in the form of cuttings, and then dumping it, so that nutrition and the trace elements which you need for plant growth are forevermore locked away in a landfill. They also produce a huge amount of methane at refuse sites, and this is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So on the whole, they're expensive, they're time wasting, they produce a lot of waste, they literally add to climate change, they're bad for biodiversity, they use a lot of water, they use a lot of land. Are lawns really the thing that we want in the 21st century, given that they originally came from something completely different and they're kind of outdated in my eyes? So just to talk here as well more about land use, because land use extends beyond lawns. Lawns are a good symbol, but at a wider level we need to look at how we are trying to landscape and change the natural landscape that we see around us. So here's a photo of coastal development in Spain, and you can see here a golf course which is bright green. You can see some fields which are where presumably forest, which is this arrow up here, would have once been, and you can see it's very dry. It's a very dry environment, and this kind of water use is endangering the future of Spanish people to meet their future needs for water. Not everywhere, but in lots of places. So if we think about it, if you're going on holiday to Spain, are you going to go to a golf course and support that industry and give them your money to keep doing what they're doing? If we can see here, this is not natural, and the effects that it's having are huge. So, for example, in Spain, a third of the country is at risk of being turned into desert, as climate change especially, but also tourism adds the effects of like farming practices. More than 90% of land bordering the Mediterranean, from kind of south of Catalonia, is considered to be at high risk of desertification, and it's almost 100% of that coastal land in Alicante and Murcia where some of the largest tourist operations currently are. And you begin to realise it's completely unsustainable model of economics that threatens the future of these areas to be kind of viable for people to continue living in. And if all it would take, it's obviously not all it would take, but if a small part of that, of the solution to all of this, would be changing land use, why aren't we doing it? Why is no one talking about it? We should be talking about it. So what are the solutions going forward? Because we've seen how lawns, I'm not the biggest fan. So solutions going forward, we can actively oppose, I'm going to use the word stupid land use, because if it can't be naturally sustained, it's requiring too much input on our part. So bin it. Golfing, not my cup of tea. Big old car park, also not my cup of tea. So every chance you get, speak out about that kind of land use. And other things are, if you have a local dead zone, so you've got some grass growing in a verge by the side of the road and it's trimmed all the time so that it's just grass, or you have a garden or something, try and convert part of that through petitioning or talking with whoever might control that lawn into maybe turning a part of it into a wildflower meadow, which is one idea that I've seen. So anyway, some questions to take away and have a think about. Who's responsible? What are the consequences? And is there anything we can do collectively? Thank you for joining us for today's Climate Clinic. Here's some of the sources that were used in this presentation. Have a great week, and we'll be back with you next week for another Climate Clinic.